To love a thing is to hate its opposite. I love the innocence and purity of children, therefore I utterly hate pedophilia. I love my wife, and therefore I hate to see her mistreated. For far too long, the evangelical Christian has been told that he may not hate anything. We are trained to not love as we ought because we are trained to never hate. If the Christian has a passionate love for the truth of God's word, the goodness of God's justice, and the beauty of holiness, he will necessarily have an intense hatred of the lies, injustice, and sin. So in this episode, we're talking about the godly virtue of hatred.
Yes.
We need to restore it. And we have to be able to actually hate those things which God hates. And in our current evangelical system and certainly our current pagan cultural system, hatred is off the table. It's not something that is permitted. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I think that hatred is promoted a lot in trash world, to be honest. It's just
right.
There's certain things that you're allowed to hate.
That's right.
And I think that a lot of times, even in the church, you're allowed to hate those things.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples that we could use, but it's a misplaced virtue, I think, in the church and in trash world.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You are absolutely not just permitted, but you're expected.
You're expected to, and if you don't, you're despised. You're ridiculed. You might be one of them, kind of thing.
Right. You must hate racism, but you must not hate. You must love feminism.
Yeah.
Right.
Would be like an example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to recapture like hating the actual things that you should be hating, I think is what the point is.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so much of it isn't enough to see these things in this world, to see the I mentioned and Joel read it in the cold open in the book, especially the entertainment complex that informs how everyone is supposed to think, what they're supposed to love, and the things they're supposed to hate, even though they never really use the word hate.
That's right.
It never gets called that.
Right.
It's, well, I'm against this.
That's right.
I think this is bad. You're not allowed to use that word ever.
Right.
You can maybe get it out of them if you try hard enough. But these things that form this moral core of everything after the 1960s to now, that you just grow up in, and it's in the air you breathe and water you drink. It's just, you get it by osmosis. You should hate that, right? You should hate all of it, because so much of it, in many subtle, very insidious ways, it is anti-Christian. It's the opposite of what God teaches in all these different ways, whether we're talking like the Disney movies we watched as children, or all the things that are available on Netflix and everything else that you don't even notice. Like, you have to sit, like sometimes I'll turn on a cartoon that I'm trying to see if can I let my kids watch this or not? And so much stuff is very subtle, where it isn't stated overtly, but it's expected that, oh, well, we're going to just be tolerant of everyone and be nice. And it's like, oh, I don't want my kids watching this.
Yeah.
But like, I'm an adult and I can see this, and I have like my radar up for it. But if you just plop your kid in front of this and say, all right, go watch this stuff for the next 10 hours, they're going to imbibe all of this and internalize it without ever thinking about it. And they're going to live in a culture where everybody thinks this way. Everybody else thinks in this same way. And so that entire system is something that you should hate, right?
Yeah. And
you should not just like dislike, I oppose it. Like, no, I hate that. I think that's horrible. I think it's evil. And there's so many things that we've talked about in previous episodes that have been done to us and to our country and to our culture. The economic expropriation that has been done over generations. And you just see it. I mean, you see, like, right now, it's impossible for young people to buy a home. That didn't happen. Like, people designed the world to be that way. Like, you made it that way so people can't have families. You should hate that. You should be angry. And we're told, well, you're not allowed to hate. Hatred is very bad. And if you hate things, that means you're probably not a Christian. All right. That's horrible. Like, get rid of that kind of thinking. And even in the previous episode, like, well, men think that way. It's like, this is bad. I hate it. but you're not allowed. We've been feminized, right?
Right.
We've been emasculated, and we're told, no, you need to approach it like a woman would, and think, well, that's not ideal for human flourishing. And so, you know, like talk about it that way.
Right.
Not, this is evil, this is bad, it has to stop.
Right.
Yes.
And that's the key. It's what you want to destroy is what you should be hating.
The object of your hatred. Yeah.
Right. And so it's a good point. You know, you're right. A lot of liberals won't use the word hate, but they certainly try to destroy things.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
They are very hateful.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
And they try to destroy typically good things, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And so even if you...
Which is the thing you should hate.
right.
They do.
Exactly. You know, even if you're squeamish on using the word hate, which you shouldn't be, you should have objects and systems and things that you're attempting to destroy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can't destroy it unless you hate it. Right. So even
As
at a
simple as that.
personal level, you know, if it's sanctification, like we're not called to, you know, sequester sin, you know, or like quarantine sin or manage sin, you know, like, but we're called to mortify the flesh, you know, and make no provisions for the flesh. So like even battling sin at the level of omissions that can become sins of commission, things that we, you know, the righteous things that we should do that we neglect. You know, it's you know, cutting it off upstream, but it's mortifying, it's killing, it's slaying the dragon within, you know, our own flesh, our own sin, but it's mortifying, it's killing, and then beyond that, slaying, you know, dragons in the land. So you know, but with that, like you have to hate it, and you're right. Like I think in evangelicalism, it's funny because like what I read for the cold open, which you wrote, Andrew, is kind of saying like you're not allowed to hate. But then AD immediately, like you made a really good point because it's really just, you know, it's not whether but which. Everybody does hate. So really, maybe the best way to kind of reconcile those two positions is you're not allowed to use the word hate. You're not allowed to say that you're hating something.
It's been sanitized.
But you are, so you're not allowed to say it. But you are allowed, not only allowed, but again, like you're mandated to hate.
They demand you to hate.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to say
things.
that, use that language, but you're mandated to hate, but you have, it's not whether but which. What do you hate? And again, the church, you know, the church just follows suit. It's funny, like the church, I feel like the evangelicalism as a whole right now is more woke. I think than culture. Why? Because evangelicals are always 5 years behind, right?
Yeah.
So culture, there's already, because evangelicals didn't win that war. The Daily Wire, which is to our shame, but the Daily Wire fought back more on wokeness than
Matt Walsh won it.
Yeah, Matt Walsh did that. You know,
with
like
a single documentary. You know,
that's right. What is a woman? Exactly. He did way better. So anyways, but you know, evangelicals are always, you know, catching up. So right now the tide, I feel like, is turning in pagan culture against wokeness, and evangelicals, you know, are always late to the party. They're like, oh, we thought we were still doing wokeness. Sorry, you know, like we'll get there when we can. So all that being said, my
still
point
have
is
my wokeness decorations up.
Right, exactly. So all that being said, my point is just to say that, you know, I think both are true. One, it's inevitable. You're going to hate something. It's not whether but which. The culture sets the tone for what you're allowed to hate. And then evangelicals, they're just a few years behind, and they say, you need that thing that the culture hated, you know, 5 years ago. We need you to hate that also. But Andrew's right in the sense of, but we need to,
we can't call it that.
We can't call it that. We need to change we can't say, you know, it needs to be a kind hatred.
It's amazing to me because the things that the culture, you know, shifts to and changes to as far as what you're supposed to hate, I can't believe that people are out there, they don't see that it's all circling around everything good, everything in the church.
Right.
The church is going to be the object of hatred, mandated hatred at some point if things don't change. That's the point of what they're doing.
Well, and it already kind of is.
It already kind of is,
Yeah. And you see that even with like wokeness. I mean, I think back to, you know, to 2020 and the mostly peaceful summer of George and like the reaction that virtually every single evangelical leader universally had was, racism is this huge problem. We need to abolish whiteness and systemic oppression and all, like they just aped all of this language, never once stopping to think, why are these people tearing down statues of Christopher Columbus? Right? Why are they tearing down statues of Thomas Jefferson? Like these people hate our culture. They hate our country. They hate our entire heritage. That's what they want to eradicate. They want to eradicate a place called America. And no one would step up to say that because the spirit of the age was entirely against them. And so you didn't have any prophets. You didn't have anyone that is willing to stand up to a lynch mob, and a literal one in this case, and just say, no, you are wrong. You need to be opposed. I love my country. I love my country's history, warts and all. I don't want you to burn it all down. And they refused to say that. They went along for the ride with all of it and hated the things that they were told. You're allowed to hate this, but they, of course, they don't call it that.
Right. Allowed to hate and must hate.
Yeah.
So you must hate racism. But one thing I was thinking that like one thing you must love, and evangelicals are the same way, is feminism.
Yeah.
So like for me, like one thing that I notice is that everybody, courage is a virtue, or maybe it's the prerequisite for all virtues. But it's appreciated. It's universally appreciated. But it's always appreciated when it's in the past. So people
after
love
the fact.
Right. People love courage after the fact. They love courage because courage is dangerous. It's frightening. So we love it once it's been safely, separated from us by 6 feet of dirt. So like, we like courage in that regard. Everybody says, "Oh, we love Charles Spurgeon. You would have excommunicated him. We love Calvin. You would have excommunicated him. John Knox for sure. That guy, jail right away. So, anyways, but with that, I think of like, okay, racism. Like part of the reason why Amazon is doing did a black square and stuff in 2020. All these, that's when a dragon is dead. Yeah. Like so if it ever was a dragon, and if it ever was really sinful and something that God hates and terrorizing the land, the way that that it's have been so thoroughly slain is when the worst bad actors in your culture, they're even scoring points by going and kicking the dead corpse of that dragon. LARPing as knights, the Red Cross. But when you want to know what's a living dragon, well, it's easy. It's the dragon that when you slash it with your sword, it bites back. Yeah. So like right now, like say like racism is bad, and see what happens. Yeah. But then say
no one's going to disagree with
right.
you
But then say feminism is bad and the 19th Amendment should be repealed.
Yeah. People will lose their minds.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where where an idol is. Yeah. That's where that's a living dragon. Yeah. That requires not just saluting the courage of the past, the courage of our fathers, but we actually need the sons of these former sires to have courage in themselves. And that's one of the chapters you devoted a whole chapter in the book to was feminism. And I think it would be worth getting into a little bit. Just some of
we're jumping ahead here. Yeah.
The early, but the earlier, the roots of feminism, because a lot of people think that feminism, they think it's just the last 20, 30 years or something, but it's old.
Yeah. So. It's very old. Yeah, it is. And it's those things where it just very progressively makes its way throughout a culture, like leaven through a loaf, and different conditions happen. The big one is, the Industrial Revolution happens, and now you start to have women working because it doesn't require as much physical strength as men. And then, World War II is the huge one where all of these women go to work in order to fill the gap of all the men that are going off to war.
My
grandmother, see that, Rosie the Riveter. Oh yeah, we can do it. And they begin entering the workplace from that point on. And eventually there begins to be legal protections. Right, same time that there's a Civil Rights Act, there are all these non-discrimination laws to protect women in the workplace and things like that. And it becomes codified where now you have to do this. Now legally you can't not have feminism, right? You can't. Right. I couldn't start a company and say I'm only hiring men, right? Because I want a workplace that's just men where we can act like men. Well, sorry, you will be fined and sued and everything else if you do that. It's legally mandated. So not only does it take courage on like the legal front, but also like once it's legally mandated, a culture begins to internalize that and think of it as a positive good. And so it takes a ton of courage to even speak even a little bit against it and say maybe this isn't so good to have this way of life. And people will lose their minds, especially, a lot of women. I mean, we talked about this in previous episode, where all of these young women who, just do what everybody always does. They go to college and they go get their career and they think, well, I'll have kids eventually someday. And then they get to their late 30s or to their 40s and they never get married and have kids. And they are massively regretful of this. The biological clock has run out and they've been lied to. Right. They've been lied to by this whole system, and it actually greatly harms people. But if you confront it, that same woman in her 40s, when she's 23, will despise you and hate you and want you dead and want you banned from the internet and everything. And so it takes courage to confront things that are not good. And nobody wants to have that. Like you said, we want to maintain tombs of the prophets, but we don't want to do the kind of things that they did.
Right.
And if you brought back John Calvin or John Knox from the dead and brought them to trash world today, like what would they think of it? Mm-hmm. Right. What would they think about our way of life here today in current year? And they would be appalled by how we live and how, more than anything else, how our churches that claim their name and their mantle refuse to say anything about it. We are terrified to say anything about it. And they would hate it. Right? They would hate it. And they would be filled with this righteous fury against it. And so that's the kind of thing that we have to recapture.
All right, I'm just going to say it. This show is fantastic. You know it's fantastic. I know it's fantastic, but I'm willing to admit there is one singular problem: the waiting zone. Right? You got to wait a whole week for each new episode of this show to drop on Fridays at 4 p.m. Central Time. Unless you go on over to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. And then you'll be able to binge watch every single episode of an entire season all in one day. So this is a season-based show, right? The whole idea is a deep dive on one singular topic so that you know everything there is to know. Each season comes out in a quarter, right? So a 3-month period, anywhere from probably 8 to 12 episodes in a season. And the moment that the first episode of a new season drops to the public, then you can go over to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries and watch all of those episodes without having to wait week by week by week for the next episode to publicly drop. So, you know what to do. Don't waste any more time. Binge watch the whole season today. Yep. What do you think are, AD, what are some of the ways that you think the church, and I'm talking about reform, I'm not talking about Joel Osteen, or T.D. Jakes, but reformed churches have embraced feminism?
Some of the ways, huh? Yeah. No, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this in the last episode. I think that the aesthetic and the style and all of this is very geared towards women. Mm-hmm. And some of it is probably out of self-preservation, but it's definitely an intentional style. I mean, there's no reason that a pastor needs to speak in these hushed, kind of soft tones and things like that. There's no reason for it, outside of, their marketing to that. Right. I think too, even some of the issues that they choose to talk about or not talk about, a lot of that is geared towards, appealing to the feminine side of their congregation.
Right.
So there's that stuff. Obviously there's the obvious stuff like, women in leadership and things like that. There's all kinds of egalitarian influences there, even if it's not official. And you have, because you get these some churches like, oh, we're complementarian, so we understand that the pastor needs to be a man, and then they have the director of evangelism, that's a woman, or the director of whatever.
Yeah. The entire staff is women, and then the pastor's a man. Yeah.
So I mean, there's obvious ways like that too. But I mean, that's one of those things that's just it's pervasive. It's everywhere. I mean, how many things could you talk about?
Right.
With that.
Did you guys read? There was a book. I think it's called Impotent Church. It's on the Canon website. It came out recently. I forget the guy's name. I'm pretty sure he's Roman Catholic. But it talked about tracing certain roots of feminism, and he traced it way back. I thought he'd go back to temperance and prohibition and suffrage and those kind of things. Oh, dude, he went back to the Catholic Church, which I love it. I'm like, yeah, get him. But anyways,
was this Anthony Esselin? Is that who wrote it?
It might be. Yeah, that might be his name.
Yeah.
But anyways, he he talked about how the infatuation with Mary. So he said that as Rome started to make elevate, when Jesus slowly but surely, subtly stopped being the example that the Christian should emulate, and it shifted from looking be like Jesus. What would Jesus do to, what would Mary do? Because what happened was, Jesus just became too holy, Mary's more approachable. It's a more feasible goal, and then also this idea that the church is the bride of Christ, or the church is a mother, and so it shifted to where like we need to emulate Mary, and so in emulating Mary, it's like, well, what did Mary do that was so good? Like what did she do that's so virtuous and worthy of imitation? And it's like, well, she receives the Lord. Willingly receives the Lord, gives birth, she nurtures. And then also, I mean, the Catholics, terribly oppressive, tragic view of, like nuns can't marry and priests can't marry, and so then that's what you have pedophilia and you have like all these different things because of this terribly unbiblical view. Well, what happened is that like all these nuns, because you told them you can't have husbands and children. And they're women. You're telling all these women you can't have children. You got to choose between Jesus and children. And the ones who are virtuous enough to choose Jesus and Gospel Coalition would be proud, right? They got rid of the idol of family. But like, so a lot of them, what they found was that a lot of these nuns had baby dolls because they would always, as they would wake up in the middle of night for to pray the rosary and do all these different rituals, but they would most of the time they would think of Christ as the infant, as the baby that they wish they had. Yeah. And so they would even have dolls. These nuns would have dolls and even cribs in their room of a baby doll of Jesus. And you could read their journals and their prayers that they would write out about intimacy with the Son of God, the baby Jesus, that I awoke and had a vision that, and the baby Jesus doll was crying and the Lord was crying for me to come to him and to seek him, to receive him and to nurture with him, to nestle with him. And I'm like, I'm reading this. I'm like, dude, this is so sad. These are just women who want to be moms. This has nothing to do with, like, I know. So anyways, but my point is that became emulating Mary rather than emulating Christ. So all about receiving, not about Jesus as King and Lord, and so, and then the church just, when it was filled with nuns with this kind of, and then the priest, they're appealing to the nuns. It's just one dude in a harem of these women that he's associating with, but sex, but it is sexual in a spiritual sense, but just not physical. And then that set the tone for all the people who wanted to be a part of the church. Like, and so anyways, he makes an argument.
And the men are also supposed to emulate Mary too.
Exactly. The men are supposed to emulate Mary. So he made an argument saying that it really goes back all the way to like over 1,000 years ago, at least the 1200s.
So he didn't even start with like the actual Enlightenment feminists, Mary Wollstonecraft.
He just says that like, but he's primarily, to be fair, tracking within Roman Catholicism. So this is my conclusion.
World,
My conclusion is that for the world, it was the Enlightenment, but for Rome, they were gay way sooner. And I'm totally fine with that position. So,
well, and talking about hating all this, and trying to destroy it, trying to end it. There are so many different ways that if you just know what time it is, you have an honest appraisal of our situation right now that we're in, that you just little decisions that you can make that start to cut at the root of this. Like even word choice. I've noticed this as well. Word choice. You'll see a typical evangelical, the latest thing in the news happens, and they'll be very distressed or alarmed.
I'm distressed.
Or concerned.
Disturbed.
Or disturbed. Or
troubled.
Terrified. Troubled. All of these words, these are fine words. I have nothing wrong with any of these words.
Yeah.
But the reality, or I weep over this, you're not weeping.
Yeah. Not literally. No.
That's not what you're doing. Yeah. Why are you using that word? Well, I'll tell you what.
That's how women talk.
Women, that's how they are too.
Yeah, right, they are.
A woman's day is not over until she cries, right? So here's the thing, like they have taken the vocabulary and the way they're expected to respond to something, right? Like when was the last time you saw a tweet or a YouTube video or a TikTok where the minister says, "I'm furious about this.
Angry about this.
I'm angry about this." Yeah. And Jesus wept, right?
Good,
and in the scripture, Jesus wept because there was a deep anger inside of him.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes. He was
troubled in soul.
Yeah, he was crying because Lazarus is dead. And he's moved, and the literal word in the Gospel of John is he was angry.
Right.
And it's like, whoa.
And angry at death, but also angry at all the unbelief around him.
I was a Christian for years before I knew that. And the person who told me that was an Indian from India. And, in India, I'm not sure if they have the same, feminist problem. I doubt it.
Yeah.
But he was like, there's an anger in Christ. And I was like, what?
What
are you talking about? Like, I didn't know, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then I did my Greek study, whatever. And it turns out, sure is.
Yeah, it never gets translated that, but that's what that's
right.
what it says. Yeah.
And so, like little things like that, even and again, people rage about this stuff all the time. It's not a trait of masculinity to have a beard and do this. It's like, but even stuff like that, like what time it is right now. Yeah. If you have facial hair, that's good.
Yeah.
In this time of androgyny, it's actually good to say, I'm actually a guy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is going to be of an outward way of showing.
Right.
I was talking to my brother once, and he had his little daughter in T-ball or something. And then we were talking, and he's like, does she like it? She's like, yeah, she likes it. And he goes, but next year, I'm not going to do that because, these days, I don't know if she's going to have a lesbian coach or whatever. I'm going to put her in a Christian, like little dance thing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. It would be nice if we had a world where a girl could enjoy Little League or softball or whatever. Sure. But you know what? That's not the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
You're right.
Oh, exactly.
And so is there anything wrong with having your girl in softball? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But, you got to know what time it is here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some of these little types of things, make a big difference.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And if you hate this, you want to destroy it, then you need to do something different, the opposite of what everyone's doing.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, you say that when you talk about that language. I'm disturbed. I'm distressed. And I'm thinking about my wife had just watched an episode of Tucker Carlson where he was talking about how there could be World War III with Iran and all these different things. And she came to me and said, Andrew, have you watched this? And she's like, she's freaking out about it. She's gonna be so embarrassed when she watches this, me telling the story. But she's disturbed and distressed. That's just how she was. And I'm like, honey, I didn't want you to watch that because I knew this is what would happen. I haven't even watched it. I'm like, yeah, I know World War III can happen, but there's nothing we can do about it. Why worry? But it's taking that language and using it in a feminine frame. Because this is how women are. That's how God has made them. They get disturbed and distressed.
They're the weaker vessel
and worried. Yeah, they want and what has God made men to be? He's made men to be to look at this and think, I'm angry about that.
Right.
I don't like that. I want to fight that.
Right.
And that's, when I see, like, I'm angry that these idiots in Washington, D.C. could sleepwalk us into World War III.
Right.
That makes me angry that they do that. It doesn't make me distressed or disturbed or worried. It makes me think, I really hate these people.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between men and women. And you see, it's the feminine frame that they constantly, regularly use. And it's no wonder why. I mean, you bring up, all the episodes run together. I can't remember which one we did, or even if you talked about it 5 minutes ago.
19th Amendment.
No, when these guys are going to Joe Rogan and to Andrew Tate and things like that. It's like, why did these guys go to them? Well, they talk that way. They don't have any bones about pretending to fit within this feminine frame. They just talk like men.
Right.
And why do they constantly write these? Why do all the young men going to Jordan Peterson and not to our churches? It's like, well, because you don't talk to them like men.
Right.
You don't speak this way. You don't, well up this righteous fury that a lot of men have and should have when they know what time it is in the world that we're living in. It's like, you should be angry about these things. You shouldn't just be okay with it. You should want to stop it and fight it and do whatever you can within your world to oppose these things.
Right.
That's how you need to talk to men. That's how you need to talk to these guys to get them into your churches and to disciple them, because they're feeling all this stuff and they don't have anybody to turn to other than the guys they see on the internet that are not even Christians.
Right.
It does replicate. So this is the thing. Like, I maybe you guys have had this experience where you'll be writing a blog or maybe a sermon, and you use a word that you never would use in real life.
Yes.
And you think about it and you're like, where did I get that? Well, I got that from Chandler, or I remember I interned for Jared C. Wilson. That's part of my story.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I would write my sermons and stuff and all this, and I would use his very effeminate style.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I had a come to Jesus moment at one point, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? Like, this is not, I'm not like this.
I don't talk this way.
This is not how anyone, and at the time I didn't talk this way.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. but it's learned.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot. And I'm not saying I'm some kind of special person. I'm just lucky to have a brother in my life that calls me on this stuff. But they just assume that that's how it's done. That's what it and is. You're going to replicate this effeminate style, this effeminate sort of kind of just mentality of the church,
mode of being. Yeah,
it's going to replicate. You're going to make your students like you.
Yep. Yeah. Student is like his teacher.
The danger of centralized power is often represented by the word king. As Americans, we hate the word king. Civilian ownership of body armor is about helping people to have increased power to resist tyrants and criminals. And so, Armored Republic is about helping you to preserve your God-given rights to the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, because he is the King of Kings, and he governs kings and he will judge them. This is Armored Republic, and in a republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen, and we are honored to be your armorsmith of choice.
Yep. So men, all Christians, but especially men, are called to hate what God hates, love what God loves. We're allowed to hate. We're actually commanded to. If we're not hating what God hates, then we're not loving what God loves.
That's right.
Hate is the opposite of love. But women, part of their role, I think part of the reason why so many women are depressed, statistically, there's more depression, more anxiety, more, all these things. Part of it is because of not, entering into marriage, not having children, and not having households. But part of it also is, it's funny, like as you were sharing that story, Andrew, about your wife, part of it is because our wives, women, have been brought into a world that they were never supposed to belong to, like a man's world. And I mean that at the level of like, the work world, the political world. There's a lot of things that the woman is the weaker vessel. There are certain things, like there are things that pastorally will go on with the church that like I just don't talk to my wife about. I'll talk to another man about. And it's not secretive. It's not that I'm not being authentic or being real. I love my wife. I'm grateful for my wife. We have a close relationship. We have a lot of joy in our marriage and in our home. But there are certain things I'm just not going to talk to her about because she doesn't need to be discouraged. She doesn't need to be worried.
This would crush her if she had to think about this stuff.
She doesn't have the frame to deal with it that I have. And so the woman is the weaker vessel. And that doesn't just mean that a man in general can outbench a woman. It means that. It's not less than that. But in addition to that,
someone in the comments is like, this one woman has the world record bench press.
Yeah, that's because people can't speak in
bench
categories.
more than you, Joel.
Right. But yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. But the point is, like, it's not just physically. When the Bible says that the woman is the weaker vessel, we've boiled that down. And I'm talking about evangelicals now, not just our world, but we've said that it's only physically, that the woman is weaker physically. If we're even willing to give men that they're physically, superior.
That's even less now.
But we won't even touch, and I'm talking about evangelicals, with a 50-foot pole, the possibility that she would be weaker in her disposition emotionally, psychologically, mentally. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say it. You can't find one woman who can beat the top number one woman can't beat the top 50 dudes in a race. Yeah. But here's the thing. The top number one woman can't beat the top 50 dudes in chess.
Yeah.
Requires no physical prowess.
Yeah. And it's not because they're stupid or something like that.
Of course not. She is a suitable helpmate.
Yeah.
God didn't give us a vegetable. She is a suitable helpmate. She is gifted and competent. I can't do what my wife does.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful for my wife. Yeah. But the smartest, it's not just the strongest men in the world are stronger than the strongest women. The smartest men in the world are smarter than the smartest women. Yeah. Ooh, that is just a scientific, that's a fact.
No, it is. Yeah.
That is a fact. And that doesn't mean there aren't incredibly, again, we're speaking in generalities. Are there women out there who are smarter than me? You betcha. But they're not smarter than the smartest guy. I'm not the smartest guy. If you haven't found that out, yet, but there are guys smarter than me, and there's no women that can beat them. And then you talk, so that's mental. So psychological and mental and physical, and then emotionally. At all these levels, women are not built for fighting. They're not built for, physically, they are built for nurturing. feeding, loving, embracing. They are not built for war. They're not built for fighting. Yeah. And part of that, this is something that I appreciated about your book, but part of that is they're not built for war, and so they shouldn't be involved even in a mock war.
Yeah.
And that's what politics is.
Yeah.
Politics is war without the bullets.
Yeah.
It's saying, you know what, before we actually duke it out, because this matters. And so we're gonna a bunch of people are about to die, but let's see if we could avoid that by having a mock battle first. You bring your troops, I'll bring mine, and let's just see who had more and who would have won this battle. And then instead of letting the bullets fly, let's just say, oh, this guy had more, he would have won, and the losers will respect that.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you bring women with the 19th Amendment, like into a vote, you're giving them, they're mock soldiers with a mock gun.
You're enlisting them into the same army.
Yep. Yeah. And so enlisting them into the same army psychologically, aka the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage, there was a straight line from that to now enlisting them in the army in combat roles in a literal army.
Yeah.
And now back to World War III, we're going full circle with this episode. The possibility of them not just being enlisted but conscripted.
Yeah.
My wife, a day is coming where my wife could be drafted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where for me to protect and provide for my wife, we now are fugitives on the run from the state. Yeah. And I'm hiding my wife so that she's not.
Yeah,
and all
I definitely
that starts,
don't want my wife to listen to this episode.
But there is a straight, But my point is that if you think that women voting is unrelated to that,
it is.
That it's unrelated, then you're wrong.
Yeah, it absolutely is related.
And you need to wake up.
Yeah, this whole thing reminds me of, just this discussion, the differences and distinctions between men and women, just dispositionally, emotionally, and psychologically. I will obviously never forget, my sophomore year of high school on September 11th. Our principal was, very competent administrator. She was, she ran the school pretty well and was pretty well respected by everyone. But she goes on the intercom and to tell us, what had happened, and she couldn't speak.
Right.
I mean, she was weeping and in tears and. If I remember, like the assistant principal, had to go on and finish the message. And that stuck with me, and it's not like she's deficient or there's something wrong with her.
There might have been something wrong with her if she didn't weep.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a woman.
She would be a sociopath if she was.
Yeah, she's probably also a mom. This is a mother who just saw, 3,000 people
just die.
Yeah. And it affects her.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And a man looks at that differently.
But should she be leading a school?
Yeah. Angry, and you see there's this leadership position where she didn't ever have to confront a situation like that ever before. It was like running meetings and organizing schedules and things like that. But here's one where you have to stand in the front and address everyone and tell them all what's going on. And it's this horrible tragedy. And she couldn't do it.
Right.
She couldn't do and because she wasn't made to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
She wasn't made for that particular role to lead in the midst of horrors. And men, I mean, not all men are built for this, but this is generally speaking how God has built man.
Right.
This is why men are warriors and soldiers and go to battle, because they can take it.
Right.
Right.
So that hate and love thing, like the absence of love is indifference, not hatred. Hatred is the necessary accompaniment of love. If I love A, I will necessarily hate B if B is A's opposite. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, in Donner's Oak and restoring Christendom, but first chopping down the oak, the Boniface option, if one of the oaks is feminism, that's a big part of it. We got to chop down feminism, and if we're gonna kill it, you're not going to kill something that you don't hate. You'll be tempted to pity it. You'll be tempted to have mercy. So you got to hate it. So you got to hate feminism so that you can chop it down. But then if we're using this, so there's the hatred. The other side of the coin, the opposite, is that you love something. And I want to posit that the thing that we love is not that we hate feminism because we love ourselves and because we love our fellow man. We hate feminism because we love women.
Yeah.
Not because we love men, but
we want lives to be good for them.
Feminism destroys men. But I don't think it destroys men half as much as it destroys women.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know of a church where there was a controversy where one of the elders thought that when there's a change happening in the church, no matter how minor, it should definitely not be, the woman doing the like announcements before, because there was a woman doing that at this church.
Right.
It should be one of the elders. It should be someone. And the purpose for that was because, as you guys know, if there's any change in a church, people are upset about it.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
And so the idea was, why would you put her as the lightning rod for this? Because she's going to be the one announcing it. People are going to come to her because she's announcing this change.
Right.
You have to protect her from that.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's not her role. If anyone's going to be, drugged through the mud because we were changing the order of worship or something like that, it should be the elder. It should be, the leader of the church. And that's not because you hate that lady. You think she's incapable of reading, or
or she's stupid,
or she's stupid or something. It's because you understand full well that, like you said, sometimes women can get discouraged very easily. In fact, I at some point I had to tell my wife to delete her Twitter because it was so discouraging to her.
Right.
And it was
I noticed I lost a
affecting her.
follower.
That was her. That was her. So like, and you could look at that and say, oh man, 80's so domineering or something. No, I'm protecting her because
it's like you told her not to read a book or something.
I would. Yeah, who would do that? But that's the point. It's like, and it's just weird. Like the things that would discourage her to me were barely a blip on the radar. Like it was just like, I could not undernd, but it's
what's
because
the big deal about that?
We're totally different.
Yeah.
Right.
In
Totally
that way.
different.
Yeah, and I have to remember to like protect my wife and even like the stuff all that, like if I'm driving in the car and listening to a podcast about some like heavy political stuff and how bad things could be, I'm like, I probably can't listen to that one when my wife is in the car because she's going to be worried. She's going to think like the sky is falling and we need to buy as much canned food as we can and head for the hills. And I'm thinking like, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Like it's nothing to me, but she's not built for that. Dad.
They need both of that.
Yep.
And my sons need to know that there's someone to go to that can comfort them. They also need to know that sometimes you just need to get up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Daddy wants you to be tough. Yeah.
No, it's good. Every little thing that we do, so like chivalry, like so many different mannerisms and customs that we've little by little thrown away. Like, so when I go on a walk just in our neighborhood with my wife, I'm always, we'll be on the sidewalk, but I'm always, walking on the side of the sidewalk that's closest to the street. Yeah. Just instinctively, because if a car comes, I want to be able to push her out of the way, if somebody's drunk or whatever, like, so like just those little things or opening the door.
You don't even think about it.
Right. Yeah. But it's just like, but those kind of things, like when we're sitting, we go to a restaurant, you can just watch men instinctively do this. They want to be in the seat that can see the door. Yeah. Or see the windows, right? Because they want to, if there's a threat coming, they want to be able to see it right away and defend.
You're in the corner, you're looking at the window.
Right, exactly. So, and all those kinds of ways. So there's this physical sense, a psychological sense, the way that you think, the way that your mind is wired is different than the mind of a woman at every level, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. One last thing, and this plays, I'm not saying this is necessarily a different category. I think it plays into emotional and mental and all those kinds of things. But let's call it spiritual. The spiritual category, there's one other way, a key way that men and women are different. And that way is that, biblically speaking, and all of mankind has held to this until 15 minutes ago, this was the universal theological position, is that women are more easily deceived. So not just that they're more prone towards worry, and not just that they're physically weaker, but that they're also, there is, I believe, and again, we're talking in general, women in general. Can you find one dumb dude, who's gullible? Like, sure. And can you find one, woman who's not as easily deceived? Of course. But in general, women are more easily deceived. Adam sinned with his eyes wide open. There's a lot of different views on, and it depends which one you take. But the point is, he and that's not to absolve him of moral guilt. If anything, he's more guilty. He didn't protect his wife. He didn't guard the garden, and he sinned with his eyes wide open. But he was not deceived. And that's the whole premise of 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 9 through 15, is Paul says, and it was the woman. Here's the thing that people forget. Paul gives the complementarians that think that, they're biblical, and they're not, but like the complementarian that thinks that's a conservative position, they'll say, well, the reason why the man is called to lead is because God created the man first. But Paul lists two big reasons. It's the order of creation, but also the order of the fall. So it's not just that man was formed first and then woman was formed from man and for man. It's not just the order of creation that sets the man as the head of the house, the head of his wife, but it's also the order of the fall. And Paul says, and it was not the man who was deceived and became a sinner, but woman who was deceived and became a sinner, but she will be saved through childbearing if she continues with faith, hope, and love, with propriety. So all that being said, this is just Bible. That's just me quoting scripture. This is the universal interpretation until literally the last 60 years. And so that women they're physically weaker vessel doesn't just mean physical though. It's psychological, it's emotional, it's mental, and even spiritually an extra propensity towards being deceived. So why are we living in a society that is ruled by women? And we live in a gynocracy.
Yeah. It's not a guyocracy; it's a gynocracy. And exactly. And you see this, and I mean, the flip side of it is like you look at like the sinful woman in Scripture, in Proverbs, and examples of them throughout Scripture. They're easily deceived, but they're also like shrewd and cunning,
conniving,
like Jezebel, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, you see it in a holy way too, where all these different examples of women crushing serpents' heads, Jael crushing Sisera's head and tricking him into coming in, into the tent and so forth. Like, there's a reason, like God, that's how God built women to be, both in a holy and an unholy way. This is how they are. And I think it's related to the deception of the serpent to the woman, and that the woman was more easily deceived. And Paul takes that up, and it's there, and it's understood, and it isn't like, Paul's this misogynist and we just need to get rid of Paul out of the Bible. And it's like, no, this is fundamentally the difference between men and women. Right. And therefore it's incumbent upon men to protect their wives and their daughters. I mean, that's the big one, is you see that, especially young women can be very easily deceived by really scummy guys. Right. And your job as a dad is to protect your daughter, and you should take, what Paul says to Timothy there and apply it to that my daughter's going to be deceived by bad men, because I'm a man and I know men are. And I know women are, and I want to protect her. I want to protect my wife from bad men. There's a reason why in the Old Testament, if a woman made a contract, and the day, it's in like Numbers chapter 11, the day her father hears of it, if she's single, he can nullify it. Or her husband, the day her husband hears of it, he can nullify it. It's not because God thinks women are stupid or they have no agency or anything like that. It's that men are there to protect them. Yeah. Right? The fathers and husbands are there to protect. That's why Adam was supposed to protect Eve, and he did not. Like that's what it's about. And so, until 15 minutes ago, it was like, nope, they're 100% exactly the same. And you can't, if you say that men and women are different in any way other than maybe physical strength, you're a horrible misogynist and you hate women.
Right. But that's a blip on the map. When you look at church history, human history, even outside of Christendom, everyone had, and that's a blip on the map that's only been afforded to us, as you argue in the book, because of the immense capital that has come from Christendom, that Christendom was so successful, that it produced so much wealth and so much innovation and all these different things, that it brought forth machines and the industrial age and all these different things, to eventually where now, you can go and work from 9 to 5 just pulling a lever instead of, behind a shovel,
or typing things into a computer.
Right. And so then all of a sudden that physical distinction was not as significant because of living in the capital of Christendom. And so it's like, well, a woman could go to the workplace just like a man can. But then we thought well, and I guess she also could go to the military like a man can. She also could be a senator like a man can.
The emotional and the psychological differences are still there, right? Even if the physical differences aren't there. And you can see this in the workplaces and how they function. And I've been in the corporate world before where it's just different jobs, like sales are almost always all men. Sometimes there's women there, but it's only all men. And like when you just get a group of guys together, it's an entirely different dynamic.
Right.
And it's really competitive, and in some ways you're at each other's throats, but you're also encouraged by the other guys, things like that, where if it's a group of women in a workplace, it's like Lord of the Flies, right? I mean, it's like catty and everyone's gossiping about each other and things like that. And it's like men and women are different.
Right.
That's how people operate. And even like saying that, people freak out. I'm sure there'll be people that see that and clip it and say, here's Andrew Isker, this horrible misogynist. But that's a reality that we've been able to kind of paper over because the economy is so productive that we can do foolish things like that. Right. That's kind of coming to an end. Like, and even you're forced into like brutal reality that like first world views of how you treat women are the result of centuries, millennia of Christian discipleship, where even a place that's not Christian like Israel, right, they're still this kind of first world country. And then Hamas comes and like kidnaps all of these female IDF soldiers, which why are they in the military? Right. And is kidnapping them and probably raping them and doing horrible things. And it's like, oh, well, we can't have this egalitarian world because the world's actually a really brutal place,
yes,
particularly for women, and men need to take the brunt of that, not women.
Right.
Like you're like the nonsense, the idiocy of this egalitarian, feminist kind of worldview is coming apart.
Right. It's the luxury of Christendom.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. All that being said, in terms of the 19th Amendment, just because we want to be practical, that toothpaste is not going to go back in the tube.
It's not going away soon.
So like just for the record, my wife votes because I'm not willing to split our household vote. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm not going to go up against, the pagans who are going to get 2 votes for my one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take those 2 votes because originally that's what it was. We believe in representative government. Right now I have people representing me here in the state of Texas in my county. And some of them, I prefer that they weren't representing me, but that's the deal. Raw democracy, in biblical terms, raw democracy is, like you go to the people and they say, crucify him. You go to the people, they say, we want a king. You go to raw democracy. Every biblical example of the people getting a vote is always negative. Yeah. And then raw democracy, that's biblical examples. But then just politically, you look at like our founding fathers, they had nothing positive to say about, just a raw democracy. So we live in a representative republic. Someone's always representing you. Once upon a time, for women, the person representing them was their father or husband, someone willing to die for them, who loved them, who protected them, provided for them. It wasn't a bad gig. That said, we can't afford to be, because some young guys, patriarchal guys, they just want to LARP all day. Yeah. We want to win. We actually want to win. So we don't want to just live in this ideological, bubble. We want to win. And in terms of winning, if you're a patriarchal guy who thinks the 19th Amendment should be repealed, please have your wife vote with you in the meantime. So I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, my wife, it upsets some people. But she just, we go to the ballot box and she just looks over at my ballot the whole time and makes sure that it's the same. It's like, who are we voting for this?
My wife. My wife.
She always asks we. Who are we voting for? But it's like, that's how she views it. And like you said, it was much more like the chieftains or the leaders of a tribe go up to the next level to the, to the clan leader, to the king, it's much more like hierarchical that way. That was how our system was set up. It was only property owners that got to vote, and very few people owned property. Right. And so that's who had political power. But you have
skin in the game.
Yeah, you have this universal democracy where like my vote counts as much as someone who just became a citizen 5 minutes ago and is addicted to crack cocaine. Like that's like, oh, we have the same level of democracy, democratic power. It's like, that's not good.
No, it's not good.
That's not good. If you are a contributing member to your society and you have the same political power as someone who is a net negative, that makes no sense.
Yep. Any further thoughts? Final thoughts on this one?
No, good stuff, man. I thought that was really good. I would say this though, what we are saying though is if you love women, then you need to hate feminism.
Amen.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't protect women, it puts them in harm's way.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so even a practical thing to do is to search your own sphere of influence and destroy any influence from feminism that you can find if you love women. And if you don't, you're hating women.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's good. All right. Nice. Did you like the episode? Great. You want to watch the next one? Wait a whole week. Or go to patreon.com, Right Response Ministries. Again, patreon.com, Right Response Ministries. Binge the whole season right now. What are you waiting for?